Hey, what's up? It's Sifu Kuttel, and I have a special delivery from my friend Tianyi over at Tactical Edged Dojo. Now, these are some throwing implements, and this has a lot of cool Chinese martial arts history behind it. So, without further ado, let's talk about Tuo Shou Biao. These are Zao Chi throwing darts from tacticaledgedojo.com. And within the classifications of Chinese martial arts weapons, they fit within the hidden weapon category and into the Fei Biao or throwing dart family. Now, to be more accurate, these are called Tuo Shou Biao, which means hand-thrown darts. And the design is very specific, and that's why they're called Zao Chi, or chisel tooth design. The darts are 13.5 centimeters long and made of cast steel, and each dart weighs around 217 grams, which is quite substantial for the size, however necessary to ensure piercing the target when thrown. They not only fit in the palm of the hand, but are shaped especially for throwing efficiency and comfort with a central thumb groove. The base of the dart has a smooth, multifaceted design called the 8-treasure tail and seats nicely in the palm of the hand when throwing. Because of the weight distribution and overall density of the dart, the throwing technique is much different from the lighter throwing knives and spikes. Rather than having a forward slinging, hinging motion of the arm, the dart is thrown with a forward press of the palm, almost like a palm strike. Although throwing darts and dart usage are well known throughout history, the exact techniques and methods for throwing the dart were rarely, if ever, recorded. In fact, most of the documented material regarding the methods and techniques for Fei Biao come from Republic-era manuals. And before we take a closer look at these manuals, I want to go back in history and talk about throwing weapons, projectiles, and missiles in general. I think it goes without saying that throwing objects like rocks, sticks, and the like to inflict harm on another goes far back beyond the record of time and extends beyond all cultures. So without using that as a starting point, I want to look more towards when things were specifically designed for hunting and for fighting. So instead, let us start in the Zhou Dynasty with actual evidence of heavy bronze weights that were used in both hunting and combat applications. Because of the holes, we can tell that they were most likely tied on a rope and launched like a bolo. Although these are not pointed like the later dart, it shows that projectile weapons were intentionally being forged. Although it is just conjecture, it is not hard to imagine that spearheads broken from the pole could be used as throwing weapons. In fact, in the Han Dynasty, it is recorded that Ji halberd heads were used as throwing implements, so it is not too much of a stretch to think that the same could be done with a spearhead, although, remember, it's just an assumption. Around that same time, there were many technological innovations for complex bow and crossbow, which were more powerful, more accurate, and had much longer range than throwing weapons. So, historically, not much is said for the usage of throwing weapons in combat. However, we do hear about nomadic tribes using throwing hammers and bolos for hunting, so the method continues, albeit for a different application. One of the other major factors that kept throwing weapons off the battlefield was heavy armor, which was popular from the Tang Dynasty through the Song Dynasty and into the Yuan Dynasty. As firearms were introduced and mobility became an important element in warfare, light armor became more and more common, as we can see from Ming Dynasty examples. That's also when we start to see the reintroduction of throwing weapons and hidden weapons like meteor hammers and rope darts. However, due to the commonality of firearms at that time, weapons like these were more for backup or last-ditch situations. The real boom of hidden and throwing weapons started in the late Ming, but really took off in the Qing Dynasty, as it was one of the main tools for escort agencies, bodyguards, and couriers that needed to protect their cargo against thieves and bandits. There is actually a really interesting reason for this. It all boils down to money, but probably not in the way you're thinking. It actually starts back in the Yuan Dynasty. China was unified under Mongol rule, and for the first time in history, Paper money was circulated and used as the sole legal tender, backed in the Mongol silver reserves. This started off fairly stable and made commerce convenient. However, note transfers were difficult to regulate across the entire empire, which set the yuan on the path for inflation, which, combined with liberal military-based spending, progressed from mild to hyperinflation towards the end of the dynasty. The following Ming Dynasty eventually did away with paper money and returned to precious metals as a standard currency. However, to maintain a national currency, banks were installed across the entire country, extending into the outreaches and the borderlands of the territory. This meant that large transports of money would be moved along regular trade routes out in the open, which could be easily poached by thieves and bandits. And so escort agencies were developed and thrived. In Beijing, there were the famous 8 great escort agencies, with the top being the Huiyou Escort Agency, which was said to have employed over 1,000 people. This was not just bodyguards and escorts, but included cooks and other workers as well. It was common for escorts in these agencies to carry weapons like polearms, sabers, and even rifles and pistols. However, one of the most common weapons that they would carry would be throwing weapons, like these. Oftentimes, these darts were carried in pouches, but could also be worn on bandoliers that were slung across the shoulder with several slots specifically for darts. In some agencies, competency tests required 3 darts to be retrieved from a pouch and thrown within the time span of a single breath, which could be anywhere between 2.5 to 3 seconds. And if you think about it, that is really fast. Darts were as reliable as the skill of the user. They could be easily carried and quickly deployed without any special type of preparation. They could strike beyond the range of a saber or a spear, and even if they did not hit with the point, they would still deliver a devastating impact force with the dense weight of the steel. Martial skill was not the only way to deal with bandits. In fact, many escort agencies would take a proactive approach to avoid conflict by making yearly trips out to visit the bandits and pay respects by offering goods and money to secure protection against ambush and avoid unnecessary bloodshed, which is a win-win situation on both sides. Now, this wouldn't completely neutralize the threat of banditry, and escorts still needed to be able to rely on their martial arts skills. However, it significantly reduced the potential of having a combative interaction to as low as some estimates of 1 in 100. As time progressed, money returned to a paper note and would be transported on newly constructed and federally protected railways. The need for escort agencies began to decline. Many agencies relied on private contracts and often shifted to bodyguarding. Sadly, this meant that many agencies would resort to protect opium shipments and even opium merchants. The end of the escort agencies came around 1921 as one of the first established and leading agencies, the Huiyou Agency, once boasting over 1,000 employees, had finally closed its doors. Technology had progressed, and the firearm had replaced the need for any kind of hidden or throwing weapons. This did not mark the end of the Fei Biao, as they were still very convenient to hide and carry, which became popular within the gang scene. And we can see evidence of this, like this photo of confiscated weapons from the Shanghai Police Department in 1925. It wasn't until this time in the Republic era that any manuals were written on the technique and usage of throwing weapons. And in fact, even the author of the manual, Secrets of Practicing Hidden Weapons, admits that any kind of information on this was scarce, and he had to travel all around China to speak with different masters to learn their techniques. And that's where we return to these specific Zao Chi and Tactical Edged Dojo, who not only provide these darts and other throwing weapons, but also TY from Tactical Edged Dojo has his own YouTube channel in which he showcases and teaches the throwing methods from the Republic era, continuing and perpetuating the art of Chinese throwing weapons. If you head over to tacticaledgedojo.com, there are also some translations of the manual Secrets of Practicing Hidden Weapons provided on the site in the blog section, with even more information about the last chance dart, dart clothing, and even the different types of poison darts that were used. I'll be leaving all the links to everything down in the description below, from the site listing of the Zao Chi Tuo Shou Biao at tacticaledgedojo.com, as well as all the many references that I used in gathering information for this video. I'd love to hear what you think about this time in history, throwing darts like this, and throwing techniques in general. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.